Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and thanks for joining this webinar. Today, we will focus on the preparations for the Higg FEM verification. So that is the main topic for today. You will learn everything you need to know about how to prepare for your Higg FEM verification. And my name is Karin Ekberg. I'm the CEO of Leadership and Sustainability. Many of you know me already. We have our company now since more than 5 years, working as consultants, verifiers, and auditors in mainly in the textile sector, but actually also in the retail sector and in some adjoined in the consumer goods as well. And I have been working at Adidas. I was responsible for environment globally at Adidas. And previously, I have worked in other companies, also being responsible for sustainability in global roles. And for today, you are all on mute. We have a very large audience today. So we have decided to mute all of you in order to have the best audio quality that we can get. So I hope that all of you can hear me well as well. And if not, please send a chat into the question function, not into the chat. All right, so we will open up for questions towards the end of this webinar. So it seems that someone could not hear me. Sila, could you say if you can hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, then it might be one individual who has a problem then. All right, so we will have time for your questions towards the end of this webinar. So please feel free to send us your questions already throughout the webinar. And you will, after this webinar, 1 or 2 days later, you will receive the presentation and also the recording of this webinar. All right? Good. So we have that, the logistics, so to say. And now let's talk also about the agenda for today. So we will be giving you first an overview of the Higg FEM verification process, and then we will walk you through the Higg FEM verification. The first step is to select a verifying body, then how you prepare for the actual verification, how you make sure that your self-assessment is complete, and prepare all your documentation. That's a really important point as well. And then we will go through the actual verification with the opening meeting and how we conduct the actual verification and the closing meeting as well, and any post-work too. We will also be speaking a bit more about the implementation of the Higg FEM and also about the SLCP, and give you a very, very brief overview about leadership and sustainability before we open up for your questions. So rest assured, we will have time for your questions towards the end of the webinar. And we will be finishing within the hour. Okay, so now let's move on to the Higg FEM verification process overview. And here you see 7 simple steps that we have defined for you. The first one is to complete your self-assessment. Then to engage the verifier. And in order for the verifier to estimate the costs and the time needed for the verification, we need some information from you. The type of factory, number of employees, if you are using chemicals in production, which chemical level you have reached, and also information about wastewater treatment, and of course your address as well. And then you make the self-assessment via the VFEM available to the verifier. So this means that in order to do the self-assessment, you need the FEM. But if you want to verify as well, you also have to use the VFEM. So if you already know that you are going to verify, you should buy also the VFEM module. So it's a separate module you need to buy in addition to the FEM module. And then once we have agreed that we will be doing the verification for you, we will review your module, your self-assessment module in advance, and also your documents. So we always do that. We download all documents from your module in preparation for the opening meeting, and then we review the documents briefly, your responses to the different questions also briefly, in order to have an overview for our opening meeting. And it may also be, if we see, for example, that there are lots of documents missing, we may give you that information even in advance of the start of the verification. And so, because the documentation is important, as you all know, but it is really important to have quite a substantial amount of documentation available for your verification. All right, we also send you an agenda ahead of the on-site visit, and of course also ahead of the off-site verification, if that is what we are doing. And then we have the on-site or the off-site verification. And finally, we have a closing meeting and we'll report the results. We submit the verification back to you. You can review the verification and then you can finalize it and post it on the higg.org. And regarding the on-site and off-site verification, you can do both. It is allowed also in this year. So for the Higg FEM 2020 cadence, it is allowed to do an off-site verification. You can have all sections and all levels verified, also the levels 2 and 3 of the chemical section. So you can do a complete verification off-site. The only other thing you are not able to do if you have an off-site verification, you cannot use the communication toolkit. So as far as SAC has decided right now, it is not possible or allowed to communicate your verification or self-assessment results with the help of the communication toolkit if you have had an off-site verification. Okay, but otherwise it is allowed to do that. And obviously we know that there are several countries that are still under very strict travel restrictions. So in some cases, actually the off-site verification may be the only option you have. All right, so this is then the overview. And now let me move on and just also, yes, and here you can get additional information. So there are protocols from SAC and Sumera about the on-site verification and about the off-site verification, and you can reach those documents here once you receive this presentation. And now also when we look at the 2020 Higg FEM cadence and cycle, here you see the most important dates. The April 30 deadline has already been passed. Up to April 30, it was allowed for you to post and unpost your self-assessment as much as you wanted. And then on April 30, it is closed, so to say. The content is locked for benchmarking. So the first benchmarking is done based on everything that has been done via the self-assessments and also verifications, if verifications have already been taking place, until April 30. After April 30, you can still post your self-assessment. It's absolutely allowed. It's also allowed to have new facilities coming in. But once you have posted your self-assessment, you cannot unpost it again. So you can only now, we are already past April 30, you can only post your self-assessment once now. So please make sure that everything is complete when you post your self-assessment. Of course, during the verification, if you choose to do a verification, during the verification, responses can be revised, documents can be added, etc., but then only by the verifier. So you yourself, the facility, you cannot do any changes anymore. Only the verifier can do changes. And of course, that means a lot of back and forth and sending documents, etc. So you would prefer to have your self-assessment very complete, very comprehensive, with all the documents needed uploaded before you make your first post then. All right, and there are no exceptions as far as I know. Once you have posted it, you cannot just go and tell Sumera, please unpost it for us. All right, so everything is still open. You can still buy your self-assessment. You can still buy the FEM, FEM, you can buy the VFEM module, and you can do so until the end of October. On October 31st, that's the last day when you can buy the FEM or the VFEM for this cadence, for the 2020 cadence. So if you want to do a verification in December, please make sure that you have bought your VFEM module by October 31st. And this is a very, very hard stop. There are no exceptions done in November and December to buy the VFEM. All right? And of course, also the final deadline here, you need to have the Higg FEM finalized and posted on December 31st this year. So remember that if you go through the verification, make sure you finalize your module and make sure you also post it by December 31st. All right? So a lot of deadlines to keep in mind, but October 31st is the next deadline for now. So make sure you buy your modules you want to have, and then December 31st. And now we will talk about how to select a verifying body, and we hope that, of course, that you will select leadership and sustainability. We would be really happy to support you with verification. So what you need to do is you go to the list of verifying bodies on the Sumera portal, and then you can select the verifying body that you want to work with. Or you just send us an email directly. We have a few slides towards the end of this presentation with our contact details. And so you can reach out to me or any other of our verifier contacts that you will see a bit later. And then we have a book, what we call a booking form. It's a very simple Word document that we ask you to complete with information about your address, of course, the type of production you have, number of employees. We also ask if you have wet processes and if you are using chemicals in production, if you have wastewater treatment plant on site, and the levels you reach in the different sections. And this will then lead to the decision if you need a generalist Higg FEM verifier or a chemical specialist Higg FEM verifier. So if you are using chemicals in production and have reached levels 2 and 3 in the chemical section, then you need a chemical specialist verifier. So therefore, it's really important that you inform your verifying body about this fact. Otherwise, perhaps a generalist verifier would be appointed to do the verification with you. And then, of course, if that person is already on site, that is a bit of a trouble. So make sure that you give us that information. And the other information here is also important for us in order to estimate how much time we need to spend for the verification. So I will just give you a very common example that to do an on-site verification, if you have reached levels 3 in all sections, and especially in the chemical management section, it's not possible to do an on-site verification in only one day because there is not enough time to go through all questions in a consistent and professional manner. So don't feel stressed or stretched by doing verifications in only one day if you have actually come far in the different sections. If you are, let's say, only at level 1 and it's a very small factory, etc., then perhaps a 1-day verification is sufficient, but otherwise it is not. So when you look at the proposals you get from your verifying bodies, please look not only at the price, but also what is delivered. Is there enough time spent for the verification to deliver a high quality verification? All right. And then, of course, there are guidelines from SAC, but they are not very strict. So there is a lot of freedom for the verifiers to decide how much time they will spend. All right, so this is about requesting a proposal. So although we call it a booking form, it is not a final booking in that sense. It is not a confirmation from your side. It is a request for a proposal form, really. And then we make the proposal, and then you can confirm. And then once you have confirmed, we will schedule the verification with you. All right, and then what about the costs? So yes, of course, we should agree upon the number of person days required, on-site or off-site. Also, there may be some time needed for preparations and reporting and follow-up. And but on-site verification may also need cost estimations on um, the transport cost, for example, flight if needed, a visa if needed, meals, hotel, and there are, of course, travel costs also linked to the total cost of the verification. And then what is important now, before you finally can select your verifying body, you actually need to complete your Higg FEM self-assessment, answer all required questions. You can use the How to Higg guidance. The How to Higg guidance is a very rich document with a lot of resources and a lot of support. It also explains exactly how the verifier should work during the verification and how they should judge the different questions. So it's a very rich and helpful guide. And then we have, and many of you have already joined our webinars on the Higg FEM. And so there we have had webinars section by section, going through each and every question in every section, explaining to you what is needed for the respective questions. And then there is also a process guide for the facilities available by Sumera. Then you can post your self-assessment by your VFEM if you haven't done that before. And then you can see here what it looks like on your dashboard on the Higg platform. You can here select your verifying body. And once you have done that, you can then submit the FEM for verification. And you can do this only if you have already posted your FEM and if you have also bought the VFEM. So you see here there are green check marks here that you have bought it, that the FEM is posted, and now you can submit your FEM for verification. And you should, of course, also only do that after you have agreed with the verifying body or with us that on the commercial terms as well, so that there is not a discussion later then about that. All right, so this was about selecting the verifying body, and now what about the practical things you need to prepare for the verification? Well, you need to consider, and this is of course also something you have been doing during your self-assessment. So who should be engaged for the different topics? And you see here we have made a staff engagement plan where you see who should be involved in all the different sections, and then section by section who should also be involved. And of course it differs from factory to factory depending on what staffing plan you have in your factory. And then you should have your documents available. And this is true for both on-site and for off-site verification, and it is really important. So I really encourage you, when you complete your self-assessment, please make sure that you explain your responses and also upload the corresponding documents to the right questions. And that will simplify the process for you very, very much for also for the next years coming, but also, of course, for the verification. And you know that next year, when you will be doing your self-assessment again, you can do what is called roll forward. You can use your old responses from the last year, and just transfer them into the new module. So the better you work from the beginning, the more consistent you work from the beginning, the easier it will be for you also later. So please make sure that you have your documents available. And then we have a document list that we would send to you before the verification, where you can see which documents we would also request to have available. And then we will do a completeness check. So we will do that even before we start the verification. We will download the documents, and we will check the documents and see if there are additional documents that are needed as well. And then additionally, for offsite verification specifically, we would need a photo documentation and potentially also a video, which can perhaps be done live as well. And for the photo documentation, we have a list, you can see it here, where we explain which photos we would like to see. And you can imagine that for the offsite verification, there is, of course, a significant disadvantage because you cannot see the factory as a verifier. So when you do the on-site verification, you always have the factory tour. You can see everything in the factory, but obviously off-site you cannot do that. So it is really important that you make photos from all these different areas. And we might also ask you to do a video with us or for us, where you walk through the factory, potentially even live, in order for us to see your factory. All right, so those were the preparations, and now let's have a look at the actual verification and the opening meeting. So the opening meeting, for those of you who have been through it, you know how it is. It's very similar to any other audit that you have. You have your introductions, you speak about the verification purpose and content, about the agenda, the requirements on the verifiers, integrity, for example. We should not have a conflict of interest related to your factory. And we should also, for example, not, during the verification itself, we should, for example, not be selling other services, etc. And then, of course, we should discuss how to deal with photos. And then you see here the list of participants that may be joining this meeting. So, for example, top management should join, in my view, both the opening meeting and the closing meeting. And then you have the environmental manager, production manager, etc., several persons who should be joining the opening meeting. And then we continue with the management interview. We look at the factory info, and also we look at the personnel info. And then we go out. So for us, we usually ask to go out and have the factory tour as soon as possible during the verification, because it gives us a good overview of the factory and gives us a good understanding of the factory. So we look at the production units, and we would like to see also that we move through the production according to the production flow. That makes it much easier to follow and to understand your production. And then we also would like to see the waste warehouse, the chemical warehouse, and you see here a lot of individual departments or areas that we would like to be able to see as well. The ventilation system, labels and safety data sheets, the chemicals management, if you are using secondary containers. So we will be checking a lot of practical things. And as you know, several of those topics listed here are linked to the waste section, and also to the chemicals management section, but also to some other sections. And then the effluent treatment plant, the laboratory, other supporting facilities, and here we would look at the wastewater treatment process, operation records, emergency response, chemical placement. We may also look at meters. We may speak to a few workers during the plant tour, and yes, and take photos if it is allowed in your factory to do so. So this is about the planned tour. It usually takes 1 hour. Perhaps if you have a large factory, it may take 2 hours to do this. And it's important also that you help with the flow of production, as I mentioned, so that we can easily follow the flow of production. But you also need to give freedom to the verifier to see what the verifier wants to see, and you need to show all important departments, especially if you have a very large factory. It is not possible for the verifier to know exactly, oh, I need to go here, I need to go here, I need to go there. But you should make sure that you show the verifier everything that is important. So that was the planned tour, and now let's see just what is the difference here in the verification process between the on-site and the off-site. Well, the actual flow of the work is not very different, really. The main difference is that there is a factory tour on the on-site during the on-site verification. But otherwise, there is we look at the document in advance of the opening meeting. We have the opening meeting management interview on the on-site verification, the factory tour, then the document review, and of course continuing interviews. And then we have a preparatory meeting for the closing meeting, and finally we have the closing meeting. So the flow is very different, but of course it looks and feels very different if you are on-site or off-site. So for the on-site opening meeting, we have the introductions, the purpose and scope of the verification, the agenda. We also speak about confidentiality. Obviously, everything we see as a verifier in your factory stays with us. We are not allowed to speak about that to anyone else unless you would specifically give us the rights to do so. And we will also speak about the criteria and the reporting methodology, also how we report back on the results. We should look at the factory layout as well. And this is, of course, also important in terms of planning the factory tour, to have that the verifier also has an understanding of the factory layout. Yes, and we will also discuss are all documents available. So if we have seen during the review of all your documents that there are lots of documents missing, we may ask you to make sure that you can prepare those documents. We would ask that already in the opening meeting so that you have time to prepare those documents while we are doing, for example, the factory tour or doing other work. So you may need to have team members who are able to do those things for you, especially during the on-site verification. This would be important. And also we, of course, should fix also who will attend when, and the information about who will be attending the closing meeting then. All right, and the opening meeting for the offsite is very, very similar. But the difference in our way of doing the verification is that we don't spend 1 full day or 2 full days in an online meeting because we think that is not so effective. And especially, for example, if there is a document missing or something that perhaps needs to be calculated, then we spend a lot of time in front of the screen, but it's not effective time. And therefore, we usually spend 1 to 2 hours in the opening meeting online, and we already then begin the verification and clarify any questions we may have. We also mention any documents we have seen that are missing. So we do that, and we do the facility info, for example, and begin with the EMS section, potentially also with the energy section. We begin the verification. And then after that, we would go offline, so to say, and continue the verification. And that is just because it is very tiresome to sit in front of the screen in a webinar during 1 full day or 2 full days. And it is also, as I said, it's also not that effective. And then you can see here for the on-site verification, we go through each questions on the Higg platform. And therefore, we usually would like to have a screen so that we can project the Higg platform and all the questions for everyone who is attending the respective interviews. And then everyone should see the questions and should see what we do. You know that for every question, we should, as a verifier, we should accept the responses, or we don't accept the responses. So we always say, are the responses accurate or are they inaccurate? And if they are inaccurate, we also need to write a comment about why they are inaccurate, and then we should then also change the response. And this is, of course, very important that you, as a factory, that you know everything that has been changed. So we should, as a verifier, we should not go and revise and say inaccurate, inaccurate, inaccurate for questions and without informing you about that. So that's really important that you then get that information from the verifier. And so you should not in the closing meeting be surprised by having a lot of inaccuracies, for example. All right, and then we together we review the document, and it is your task as a factory to explain your responses. So remember that it's not the task of the verifier to explain all the responses to you. You should be doing that to the verifier. So you explain, yes, we have a yes here because we do have a policy, we have a long-term strategy. Our strategy runs until 2025, and we have included those and those topics there, and we have those and those goals and those implementation plans. So please, you as a factory, you guide the verifier through the verification, and you explain the documents to the verifier. And of course, you may have documents that you don't want to upload to the platform. And for the on-site verification, that's fine because you can then share or show the hard copy versions of the documents. That's fine. Off-site, we would still need you to send it to you or send it to us or show it in a video, for example. You need to have some way of being able to show the documents to us. Otherwise, we will not be able to verify that particular question. All right, and of course, then depending on who is responsible for the section, you will then be working with a verifier. So you may have different people who stay with the verifiers throughout the verification. And then for the offsite verification, we will do the same. We will verify each question on the Higg platform. And even if we are doing a particular verification of a question offline, so to say, we will still explain the results to you over in meetings or in the closing meeting. So we will in any way explain to you everything we have changed. And of course, we will have a look at documents, and we will also have a look at the photos that you have sent. And we need digital documents, as I mentioned. And then, so when we are working offline, we would be sending you emails. We have a table format for that, where we, per question by question, we list the questions we have or what is missing. And we can then also set up calls to discuss them. So it may be a series of a few calls that we would have. And then finally, of course, the closing meeting as well, as opposed to having only one day on site. And so this means that the offsite verification sometimes may take a few days in total. It very much depends on you. If documents are missing and you need 3 days to collect the documents and send them to us, of course, then we will only be able to continue 3 days later. Okay, so but it's working quite smoothly also with the offsite verification. It's just a different approach. All right, and then as a preparation for the closing meeting, we would need some time to prepare the closing meeting reports and make sure that we have captured all questions we had and have seen all the evidence materials that we would like to have. And then we have the closing meeting. And this is basically very similar if it's on-site or off-site. We always prepare for the Higg FEM, we prepare a PowerPoint a presentation to you with all the results. And in that PowerPoint, we have, of course, information about which facility we have been verifying. And then we have an overview of your results, a screenshot of the self-assessment results and the verified results. And then section by section, we walk through and show you which questions you can still continue working on. And so it's not like a clear action plan. There is no such template from SAC or Samera available, but it is a list of the questions that you can continue working on if you would like to improve your performance. All right, and then we summarize, of course, the findings, as I mentioned, and we also speak about best practices. So what we have seen in your factory that we think, yes, this is a really good practice, then of course we mention that to you as well. And we also include photos into the presentation so that you can see also examples. For example, let's say the waste storage was not really orderly and clean, then perhaps we have a photo from that. And then, of course, the results are confidential, and we remind ourselves also about that. And then we have time for any questions you have or explanations that you need. And so please use this time with a verifier. Make sure that for you that everything is clear before you let the verifier go, so to say, and make sure that you ask all the questions you need. Also, if you need guidance on why a question perhaps was not or a response was not accepted, please make sure that you ask for those explanations from the verifier. It is, you know that, it is not an audit, it is a verification of your responses. So it is not a black and white or pass or fail exercise. We are also encouraged as verifiers to explain the questions to you so that you can also move forward and improve your results over time. And then, of course, we will speak about the next steps. We will also make sure that you are aware we have our internal quality review that always takes place as well. And then we also have a feedback survey that we send out to you where we collect feedback from you. And that feedback is really important for us because we do want to improve. We want to make sure if there was anything that you were not happy with, how we conducted it, or anything, you can raise any questions or concerns with us. And then, of course, then finally, when everything is done, we submit the verification to you. So this means that when you submit your module, your self-assessment to us, you cannot change anything anymore in that module. Only the verifier can do that. But the verifier can upload additional documents for you or remove, change documents, change responses. So that is also your opportunity to then make sure if you have errors in your self-assessment, to make sure that you can correct them in the verified module so that the verified module is really perfect. And now the verifier can then submit the verification back to you. Now it is in your hands. You cannot change any responses, but you can review everything, and you should do that. Go through all the questions. Are you happy with the results? Are they correct according to your views? Are there complete explanations from the verifier when something was inaccurate, for example? And so you should really review it well. If there are things that still need to be changed, you can just send it back to the verifier. So you basically submit for editing back to the verifier. The verifier can review and change whatever needs to be changed and submit it back to you again. Once you are happy with all the results, that they are correct, then you can finalize your module and post it. But once you have done that, you cannot unpost it again. So that's the same as with the self-assessment after April 30th. Once you have posted your verified module, you cannot unpost it again. All right, so you review and finalize the verification, and then you post the verified results as well. And now we also have for the on-site and the off-site, the closing meeting explanations, but it's very similar. So no big difference, only that on-site, of course, we will have people in a room together with the verifier. And for the off-site, we will not have that, but we still ask that your teams join, and we still ask that your top management also joins the closing meeting. And there, of course, also because we may have been working offline for a while, it is important that everything is clear to you as well. So remember, take that opportunity with the time, with the verifier, use that to ask your questions and also raise your concerns. Okay, now regarding the Higg FEM and SSCP, Leadership and Sustainability, we are approved FEM and SSCP verifying body and verifiers, and we are also trainers. And you can see here in which countries we have local experts for Higg FEM. So in all those countries, we have people on the ground who can do on-site verifications with you, everywhere generalist verifiers, and in several countries, we have chemical specialist verifiers as well. And then we have trainers in those countries, in Bangladesh, Germany, and India. We can do on-site verifications by traveling to your sites as well. So, of course, there are still lots of travel restrictions due to COVID-19, but in some cases, it's still possible for us to travel as well. And of course, in all cases, we can do off-site verifications. There are no restrictions related to which countries we can do. We need to be able to support you with the language, the local language. You need to be able to do the verification in our language, English, German, Turkish, etc., in Bangla. And of course, we need to be able to make a proper verification off-site as well. And then here you can see all our local contacts. So a lot of photos, a lot of names. And when you receive this presentation, if you are interested in verifications in Indonesia, for example, you will know that we have Fauzia, who is our local verifier. But for that interest, you should contact me. So you see here where you can contact the local verifier directly, and in some cases you should contact someone else. And then for SSCP, so remember we are also doing SSCP verifications, and here are the countries listed where we are approved as a verifying body. And here you can see the countries where we have local people available. And for SLCP, as you may know, it's different. For SLCP, you need, as a verifier, you need to be approved for a particular country, and most of the time it's your own home country. We have a few examples. For example, in Bulgaria, we are also approved for Macedonia. And in Tunisia, we have a verifier who is also approved for several other countries. And in Indonesia as well, for Indonesia and Malaysia. All right. Okay, and here you have a booking page where you can book a time slot with me. If you want to speak to me, you can also send me an email directly, or as I said, you can contact our Higg FEM verifiers directly. And here, for those of you who have missed our webinars about the Higg FEM 2020, and especially about the changes in the 2020 version, you can click on those links and go to the webinars and listen to our webinars where we have gone through question by question for each and every section. All right, and here are some of us. We are growing. We have a very large team now. And now it's your turn. I want to open up now for your questions. And I can see already that we have a few questions that have come in here. So let me look here. All right. The first question here is, what is a positive list? All right, so this is related to the chemical section. And a positive list, a chemicals positive list, is a list of chemicals that have been approved specifically to be used in the factories. So they are not blacklisted, they are not gray listed, but they are really approved to be used in the factory. Okay, and the use of the communication toolkit. Yes. So once you have verified your module on site, you can download the communication toolkit. And the communication toolkit explains to you how you can communicate externally about the scores that you have from the Higg FEM. So there are like logos that you can download and use on your website or in any communication. You can even do business cards with your Higg FEM verified results. So you can only do this if you have a verified module that has been verified on site. All right. And yes, is the on-site verification in English or in the main language of the company? Yes, in most cases it will be in the main language of the company. Yeah. So, and yes, I explained about the communication toolkit. A question, may we have a recording of this session to share with our plans? Yes, you can. Absolutely. You will receive both the presentation and the recording of this webinar either tomorrow or the day after from us. And how to get the certificate after the on-site verification? Yes. So you can download the communication toolkit, and there you have all the instructions about how you can use the certificate after your verification. Yes, if we have verified 2 times by one organization and different verifier, what should we do for third time? Yes, it is actually allowed to do repeated verifications by one verifier. That has to be, the verifier needs to report that to Semera. There is a specific form to do that. And there seems now that the requirements are not that strict as they seem to be at the beginning. So you should check with your verifier, and if you are unsure, you should check with Semera. And then the question, from where do we get the leadership and sustainability documentation list? Yes, you will receive that documentation list once you have decided to verify with us. So that's part of the preparation for the verification. So once we have agreed that we will verify your facility, we will then send you the agenda for the verification, and we will send also the document list. And if it's an off-site verification, we will send you also the photo list. Is there any additional steps if anyone already approved for Higg Index? Do we need it brand-wise? I'm not sure I really understand your question here. You don't need to have a permit or anything from the brands you are selling to, if that is what you are asking, or otherwise perhaps you can explain your question again to me, please. Is it allowed to do off-site verifications repeatedly? Yes, it is allowed. There are no restrictions. So like last year, it was allowed to do off-site verifications. This year, it is also allowed to do off-site verifications. So you can do it 2 years in a row. Next year, we will see if it will be allowed to do off-site verifications. I cannot speak about next year, but this year, there are no limits. Are there any criteria in determining when to use which option, on-site and off-site verification? No, there are no clear criteria in that sense. It is really up to the factory to decide, and usually it is recommended that the verification should take place on-site. But as we know, it is not always possible to do that due to travel restrictions, due to COVID-19. And you may also have other restrictions. Perhaps there is no local verifier available in your country or in your region. and then you may choose an off-site verification. So this year, last year as well, actually quite a lot of factories do choose an off-site verification. There may, of course, also be other reasons for you to choose an off-site verification. There, you don't need to explain to anyone why you are doing an off-site verification. So it's really up to currently this year. So it's up to you to decide what you feel is the best. And then what is more beneficial, on-site or off-site verification? Well, I think that the on-site verification has an advantage because you have the possibility to do the factory tour, or you always, of course, do the factory tour when you do an on-site verification. And there, the verifier can get a better impression of the practicalities in the factory. So that's the benefit. And another benefit is, of course, that you can communicate your results publicly by using the communication toolkit. And and this is a question about the air emission section. What do you mean by refrigerant replacement log under the air emissions? So what is meant here is that whenever you have to add a refrigerant in any of your machines that uses refrigerants, you should make a log of that. So you need to know which quantity of the refrigerant that you add to the machine, and you should then make a log of that. So that log, a log is always like a logbook. It comes from the shipping industry, where you always write the date and time and what you did, and you note any data that you need to document about that occurrence. So in your case, it would be date, time, why did you replace, what did you replace, which machine, which quantity, and who did it, and any also remediation that you need to do. Because obviously, if you have a leakage so that you have to refill with refrigerants, then you need also to make sure that you can stop that leakage. So I hope that responded to your question. What is the methodology to get associated with your organization as a trainer? Well, you can reach out to me and then we can have a conversation. So welcome to reach out to us. Yes. Okay, please email me this presentation this week so that I can follow up. Yes, you will receive the presentation this week. But you can also already contact us. So I think if you Google us, you found our contact details. Yeah. Here is a tricky question. Our facility is newly started. We worked only 4 months in 2020. Please advise on how to fill the FEM. Is it acceptable if we add 4 months of data and go for verification? Yes, you can do that. You can absolutely do that. And of course, it's not only about the quantitative data, but also there are a lot of processes and procedures that you need to have in place that you can respond about in the Higg FEM. So I would encourage you to go ahead and use it and go for verification. But what you need to keep in mind is that for the quantitative data, you will not be able to draw a baseline, for example, since you have only 4 months of data. So it would be better when you develop your baselines and when you set your targets, if you use the 2021 data, that will be more complete since you will be operating during the full year 2021. But there are lots of questions. If you have already started looking into the self-assessment in the Higg FEM, you will know that there are lots of other questions than just the quantitative questions that, of course, you can complete fully already. Can verification be performed for more than once in a year? No, it is only once a year. You complete your self-assessment once a year and you verify once a year. So once you have done that, you cannot do it again. All right. Okay, and here we have another question. What kind of challenges may we have as a verifier during conducting off-site and on-site? Well, for a verifier, of course, there may be lots of challenges. I already talked about the advantage of having on-site in terms of having a factory tour. But other challenges may be, for example, when documentation is not available. One thing that we have been talking about a lot during our webinars that we held about each and every section, that is a challenge as well, that is the quantitative data. And I really encourage all of you facilities to make sure that you have your quantitative data well managed in a proper Excel template, month by month, year by year, and that you have all your calculations that you do in that same Excel table as well. So this is a challenge for the verifiers, because sometimes, for example, you have done your baseline with the normalized values, and then you set your targets in absolute values, but then it's not comparable, because the baseline is of course there to build the groundwork, to be the platform, the foundation for what you will be doing moving forward. So it's not comparable anymore. So if you have a normalized baseline, you should also set normalized targets. If you have an absolute baseline, you should set absolute targets. So this is a challenge for the verifier, because then suddenly a lot of calculations need to be redone, and a lot of numbers may change, and then you have to mark all those questions with inaccurate. You have to change the numbers, and working in this table online is not easy, not during the self-assessment, but also not during the verification. So this may be a challenge. So those were just two examples of challenges that we may see as verifiers. Okay, I think those were all the questions we had. And we are also right on time. So thanks a lot for all those great questions. And one more. Let me see. Yeah, no. Okay, so with that, we have come to the end. Let me see, there was actually one more question. Let's take that question as well. Let me have a look. Okay, regarding the facility that had started last year with 4 months. So how do we set the baseline in 2021? Because many processes will be added in the future. Please advise. This is a very tricky situation. There is no easy way out there. The best would, of course, be if you can set your baseline when you have your processes already added and in operation. And otherwise, you may need to work with a certain baseline today, and then perhaps in 2 years, you will change it again in order to be able to have comparable results. So you may need to do some hands-on work here in order to find the best approach. We have 3 factories in a storied building which are under the same owner. Do we need to register for 3? If they are 3 separate factories, yes, you should do that. All right, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this webinar. And I would like to encourage you to take contact with us if you're interested in verifications or in training, or if you have any question. Please feel free to reach out to us. But thanks so much for joining today. And I wish you all the best and all luck with your verification. And take care. And we will see each other soon again, hopefully. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.